At that time, the market was not good at all. I had friends going to Harvard and a ton of Ivy League schools. No one was getting jobs. There were a few hundred people that went. Resumes got submitted. If they took 12 of us down to New York City, and that was the real interview. And he wrote code on a whiteboard. And I remember I walked out of that room and it's like, I think I have this job. I was the only one that ended up getting that job out of the, couple hundred people.
As we mentioned earlier with AI and everything, there's a kind of transition happening maybe with future work. What is your advice for someone who may be like a new grad and is facing like a tough labor market, similar to what you faced when you graduated? But also there's a lot of turnover, even if you land a role and position. I feel like you have so many great mindsets and perspectives. So I'm curious to hear what your advice would be for someone that may be in that position.
What we're facing right now, the pace and change of the technology, it is so far surpassed human knowledge and learning. If you think you're going to just get something by submitting your resume everywhere, the probability nowadays is very, very low. I am firmly convinced no matter what happens with the evolution of tech, nothing will ever replace.
Hey, Dave, how are you?
I am fantastic. How are you doing today, Dar?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm looking out my window and it's super sunny in Austin, but there's no place I'd rather be than sitting here with my good old friend Dar.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you're taking the time to speak with us. To start off the conversation, I like to kind of do a connect the dots of your experience, of course, your career. So if you could take us back to like when you were younger and what kinds of things you were interested in. I actually have not had this conversation with you. So I'm really excited to learn, what young Dave was up to and interested in.
Yeah, I love the question. And then, I guess for those listening, none of this is scripted, which I don't know how often that happens nowadays. So young Dave, when I was really young, I was so fascinated by garbage trucks and lawnmowers. So I was convinced that, told my parents I was going to end up being a garbage man because I love the mechanism that crushed the garbage. And I was going to be a lawnmower man. And they supported me my whole life and said, well, as long as you're happy. But I was really active outside. The biggest thing was looking out my window on a weekend, praying that it would be sunny outside because we used to play street hockey from sunup to sundown. And the only rule was to be back in the house in time for dinner and meals, and friends could come over, but we were outside day and night having fun. And then, later in life, I would say when I was like early teens, my dad was really good at buying computers and breaking computers. He broke every single one from our Apple IIe to like Tandy computers to the PC generation. But that being said, I have a lot. I could thank him for all of this because when he broke something, he would just give it to me and say, if you can fix it, it's yours. There's no loss. And quite frankly, that's how I learned how to really start enjoying computers, PCs, building them, started coding and fixing software and all that stuff. So can kind of in drawing the dots, can kind of see how I ended up in that space over time. I guess machinery, garbage, and computers got me into this career.
One, I love how supportive your parents were with any ambition you had. And they just encouraged it to being like, if you're interested in it, go explore it. And then two, the opportunity to kind of say, hey, here's this thing that's broken. Why don't you try to fix it, see what you learn? And what was it about like mechanics or like physical things that you loved to kind of explore and fix? And I'm assuming this also took you into your next chapter into college.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a great question. We've thought about this for a bit in terms of like strengths, weaknesses, and typically strengths are the things that give you energy. And when I think about your question about building, my first thought was like Legos. I loved Legos when I was a kid and would just I'd build the kit, but then just put the pieces aside and it would be in this big box of all the things I built. And I enjoy just building things from scratch, not knowing where it's going to go. So I don't actually know. I bring up the strengths piece because I don't actually know if the strength was building or had anything to do with the computer, quite frankly. I think you're kind of going on a little bit of a creative journey, and I was never good at drawing or kind of artistry, but I think using my hands in going on that journey to create something and not knowing kind of where it was going to go, that's probably more of what it is. I've never thought about this before, but your question prompted it. And then I think at least I was a bit more daring when I was a kid. I think most people, as you get older, you get a little more confined in risk and the ways of the world. But I think on the PC side, taking something that's usually pretty expensive, even as a kid, you're going to be a little less daring to ensure you don't break it more. So that's always important for me to say that earlier. I think my dad giving me a little more carte blanche, like it's done already, really allowed that exploration a bit. But yeah, I think it's maybe a little more around creating and doing that in a way that has some kind of cool tech around it. That's probably the mix.
Yeah.
But sorry.
No, sorry. What I was thinking as you were speaking about like Legos and things, like my brother, he was really into Legos too when he was younger, and he went on to become like a mechanical engineer. So I think there's like some connection with people who are like super into Legos and wanting to build things. Like actually break things down, build them, and put them in new, unique kind of ways. So I wonder if I don't know if there's studies on this, but that would be really cool to kind of check if that, inspires people to go into these types of careers or majors that help you to like build things.
Yeah, probably. I mean, when I was a kid, everybody played with Legos though. So if I did that study, I would probably look at who was an avid builder of Legos, all these things. Did not go into chemical or mechanical engineering to see where they missed, but they missed that that uniqueness. But yeah, you were saying how that landed for college, things like that. It was actually interesting. Is when I was in high school, I had an opportunity to do an internship it was a family friend. It was actually my fourth grade teacher, who my mom was really close with. Her son started this company, and he built some software, around computer science and software itself. But when I went to help that company, it was really cool because I got to start building out the infrastructure in their buildings and laying Cat5 cabling and setting up all these servers and running wires. So actually very similar to the building side. But from there, my job was really to QA or do quality assurance on their software. That was all custom build. This was in the 90s. So it's not like we had, pre-built kits. But I was responsible for testing that across different operating systems, platforms. Back then it was, Netscape was a web browser. Internet Explorer was a web browser. So we'd have to test that on different PCs, Macs, all that stuff, and QA test. And I loved it because I just felt like I was a detective. You're almost incentivized to find the issue. As a QA tester, there's no such thing as perfect software, but you wanted to ensure it was a quality product. But when you're working with a quality product and you found that glitch, it was, to me at least, it was very satisfying. And then I would sit with the developers, we go through it, they'd fix the next iteration and we'd release it. But yeah, that was in high school, kind of leaning into college. That started probably building that path for me.
Yeah. No, I think it's, and also I'd love to hear your perspective of like how you've seen technology evolve, because like being part of it at that, like, not beginning, but like in that critical period where like the internet and, all these like technologies are like growing very rapidly. And to be part of that, I'm sure was like really cool and to be part, like contribute to it, right? Like you built on these things. So that's like really cool to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll start. It's another one from my parents, quite frankly. We had something called Prodigy. The internet wasn't around yet until 94, like mainstream internet. But in 1988, and I remember this because my dad had the sticker on the keyboard with the password, which is a big no-no. But it had 1988 in the password. And so we had this thing called Prodigy that you would dial up into kind of their homepage. And I'll never forget, I think he ordered something, got delivered by UPS, and he also bought a fax machine just to send like an order to the local Italian restaurant to get a pizza. He was just interested in tech. But anyway, so it started with that. So by the time AOL started coming out and some of these other platforms in 94, I was already on this stuff for 6 years and
Yeah.
also super young in those years. I remember my cousin and I would play these games and friends. So, yeah, when the World Wide Web came out, I'll never forget I went to MTV. I downloaded Fuji's Killing Me Softly. I think I clicked the download button and then played hockey outside all day. Probably had like a full semester at school, came back, and it was like 80% downloaded and still had to wait a couple hours. But yeah, so, in the run up, I went to university at the end of the 90s into the 2000s. So by then, yeah, the internet was already taking off. It was that next wave. And prior, a lot of the software you tested, I mean, we walked around with a floppy disk or a CD to install it. So yeah, I'd call that like I guess for me, the initial phase of, how I learned tech and where that was. And then, moving on to kind of late high school and into early college, I actually went to become a physics major and a computer science minor. I loved physics in high school.
Yeah.
And I started coding a little bit in high school, and I really loved the logic behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And that quickly went out the window. First semester, all my friends are taking intro to psych and statistics and all this fun stuff. And I'm in, advanced physics with calculus, components, and quantum. And that's when I realized I actually don't like real math as much as I did my whole life growing up. So I pivoted to business there, but long way of saying, and I'll fast forward all the way to today, but a lot of what I learned, and I knew how to code a ton of different languages, and I pivoted kind of my major and focus, but a lot of everything I was coding back then was predeterministic coding. So you had to account for, whatever could go wrong. If it goes wrong, this is how we'll treat it. And that's vastly different from AI capabilities that we're seeing today in probabilistic coding.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are big blocks of time of like, for me, pre-internet, with internet, coding all around that. And that's lasted for most of my career. And obviously now we have this next wave, and AI, as we all know, isn't new, but I think when you see how technologies get democratized to simplistic ways of engaging with their end users, that's when you kind of see a hockey stick of adoption. And that can drop off very quickly in today's world, or it can keep going. So listen, right now, I mean, we are in, I guess if I think of my whole lifetime, it's probably the equivalent of people asking like, do you hear about this AOL internet thing? Are you using these chat rooms? Are you browsing and looking at all, we don't need an encyclopedia anymore. I mean, it was super game changing at that time. And I think people that were born post internet don't realize like you engage with business by calling them or showing up in a store. That was it.
I
So
know.
yeah, it feels like that wave again.
Yeah, it definitely does. I would love to hear your thoughts on, how you kind of see AI evolving. It already kind of made such a big wave, but, where do you see it going in the next few years? And how does that impact, what is happening in the workplace? Because I know, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit later and save it because I want to talk about where you ended up next after your college and where you are today, right? So take us through kind of those next steps before we get to the AI piece.
Yeah, sure. So going through college, went to school at University of Albany, upstate New York. As one, I have three older sisters and a brother. So my parents, growing up in New York, said, "SUNY at," you can fill in the blank. And so I went to Albany. My eldest sister went there. I thought the world of her. So I said, if it's good enough for Jen, it must be the best. And then when I got there, as I said, I kind of jumped right in with the physics and computer science. And then when I just wasn't feeling that, I remember having a conversation with my dad at the time, and he had his own business and, grew that business in his career. And we had this conversation, and he kind of said, listen, you can never go wrong with business, right? Whether it's accounting, whether it's core business principles, whether it's understanding finance, these are all good life skills, regardless of what you decide. So it sounded really reasonable to me. So I was in my second semester freshman year. I started getting into business a bit more. I was really interested actually across most of the subjects. And to get into, the business school as an undergrad, you had to have a bunch of prerequisites like any college would have. So I took economics, and I took a little bit of that in high school. I took some accounting and marketing and management information systems. Long way of saying, I was actually really, really good at accounting. Like so good that the career counselor, she told me, she's like, you should go all in on this. These are where the jobs are. And I was like, I got to be honest. I love doing it. I'm sorry. I'm really good at doing it. Just, I wouldn't want to do this for my career, like day in, day out. I want something with like a little more adventure. I didn't know what that was. So long way of saying, I ended up majoring in management information systems, which ironically is, most people will end up majoring in ideally something they enjoy, but they don't know. I kind of knew I enjoyed those aspects. And so, from my upbringing and the stories I told you, I went into that. And then I really loved marketing too. I was just fascinated by the psychological side of marketing. So I did a double major there. That kind of just happened. And then because I started on the computer science side, I was also taking a lot in economics. So I ended up minoring in economics. And then I was about to do a double minor in computer science. And again, this sounds like I was this incredible student. Some of it was just how the cards fell in terms of like getting credit for multiple classes and things I enjoyed. And I'm just interested in a lot. But I had one more class to take in computer science, and it was on something called recursion. And for those that don't know coding very well, the basic concept was, the fewer lines of code you could write with accomplishing the same goal of whatever that program was, the better, because less processing time, doesn't require as much processing power, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember I was just writing these programs. They were accomplishing what they were supposed to do, but too many lines of code. And the professor was like, nope, not gonna work. Redo it. And I looked at him like, that's it. I'm saying goodbye to computer science. So I
Yeah.
1 4 15 class I was left. I think I'm going to be okay with a minor in economics and a double major in MIS and marketing. And that's what I did. But it's funny because how did that open up the door to the job today? Well, to be honest, I graduated in 2003. And at that time, the market was not good at all. I had friends going to Harvard and a ton of Ivy League schools. No one was getting jobs. And it was back in the tail end of that year, around October, November, that a company came to campus and started talking about consulting and talking about kind of marrying technology to business issues. And I'm sitting there at this conference, there were hundreds of people there because, anybody, wanted to get a job. And I remember thinking, like, am I dreaming right now? I mean, this job sounds so insane that you would get paid. I'm not even 21 at the time. And like, you're going to travel, you're going to be with clients, you're going to be talking about the hardest, most complex issues. You're going to be helping us solve and make an impact. And then you're going to wrap up and then go to the next project. It just didn't even seem real. I'd never heard of consulting before. And to be honest, at the time, I was interviewing a lot on campus, and some of these jobs were very sales focused jobs, which I enjoy selling. So that was all good, but I felt like they were well away from my core strength in management information systems. And I remember talking to friends and family, feeling nervous. Like, first, I want to get a job, but if I got a job in something that I really don't want to do, I felt like every month and year out of college that I was doing this job, I'm kind of creating a new profile for myself. And what if that's something, even if I made really good money, what if it's actually something I don't enjoy? I was really nervous about that. But at the same time, in the hierarchy of needs, it was also like, get a job first. I mean, especially during that time. And long way of saying, I mean, you talk about crazy odds. At that time, like I said, there were a few hundred people that went. Resumes got submitted. If people could believe this, you used to print out a document called a resume. You would physically hand it to the recruiter. They would physically read it. No AI screenings. But long story short, I think they selected maybe about 80, and we interviewed on campus. And from there, they took 12 of us down to New York City. And that was the real interview. And it's crazy because that interview was wild. It was, 3 different rounds, 45 minutes each. The first, still very, very close with the gentleman that brought me into that company. But it was very much a behavioral interview. And that felt really good to start there. The second kind of was supposed to test your nerves and put you in a pressure situation. It felt good about that. And then the third, getting back to computer science, the gentleman brought me in the room, made some small talk, and he said, okay, hang on 1 second. And he wrote code on a whiteboard for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 6 minutes and 20 lines of code. And he said, well, you said you know all these languages, so what does this do? And I explained it to him and changed some things around and explained it to him. He said, all right, that's it. And I remember I walked out of that room and I was like, I think I have this job. I think it's in the bag. And it was just crazy. But Sure enough, got back to campus. I hear from a lot of my friends who also interviewed, remember the very tense time. And they were all saying, we heard back. Fortunately, didn't get it. And I started realizing like I was the only one that didn't hear back. And long way of saying I was the only one that ended up getting that job out of the couple hundred people. So
Yeah.
for those that tell you luck isn't on your side, I mean, there's always one. I would say, and I still abide by this very, very heavily, whatever is within your control in life, control it. Do the best you can, get the best grades you can, lean into the things that make you the happiest and you enjoy the most. But just know, being in the right place, right time, it's luck. I believe a lot of it's luck, and you can shift your luck, no doubt about it, and you can keep trying. But when it's easy to look back and see these doors that open, that door opening for me, it got me to where I am today. And I'd love to say if I didn't get that job, I would have found something else and I would have been just as happy and all that good stuff. But
Yeah.
to be able to look back on a career at this point and to be able to say most days you've been super happy and enjoyed doing what you're doing. You just don't hear it a lot today. People jump to a number or something they think they're going to love, but you can find something you really love doing, those attributes similar to what we said about childhood before. I feel very lucky for that. So yeah, thanks for letting me go on a rant there.
No, thank you for sharing. I relate a lot to the story. I also, as part of my MBA, I studied management information systems as well. So, yeah, it was very cool because I got to take these technology classes essentially. Like I took one where we had to take apart hardware and like put it back together. Just things I'd never done before, and like a coding class, database class, right? So you get kind of like a really great, kind of like a high level of all of the different ways you can be part of tech. So I thought that was cool. And then also consulting. I had the similar reaction with consulting, like when I first heard about what it was. And I was like, what? You get to travel and just like be part of all these different teams and help solve problems. And I was like, that sounds really cool, So that was also my introduction to it. So I relate a lot to your story. And it seems like, it was a great blend of all of your different skills, right? You had the tech skills, you had the business skills, and then also just wanting to be helpful and solve problems. And it's like, how can I help this client or this person in achieving their goals, right? So that's really cool. It feels like it was a perfect kind of blend of that. And then the opportunity, like you said, taking it seriously and controlling what is within your control. Like, let me take these interviews seriously. Let me show up, and be prepared. Again, do well in school, right? All of it helps to kind of get to where you are at that point. And then that lands you the opportunity out of, like you said, hundreds of people that were there, which is amazing in itself, like to kind of say, wow, okay, I got chosen out of all those people.
Yeah. I mean, listen, like in life, like I said, I feel extremely lucky, but if you're ever behind me in a line, I always pick the wrong line. I've never won anything like bingo. I can think about all these stories as a kid. Like I even gave my bingo card to my grandma and then she won. I gave up my seat at a hockey game to my youngest sister. She ended up getting all the gear. So I am not lucky in that regard. But all that to say, I will say, I was born a devout optimist. It's how I think. I'm a realistic optimist, but I do feel like there's something with that as well. I think if you're if you see the world in a bit more of a positive light and the good that can come from things, I don't know any other way. So, I feel like that aspect has probably helped in that journey.
Yeah, especially I think, and I do notice a lot of people are feeling it in this job market as well, where, there's a lot of changes constantly. So even if you land a job, it's like you don't feel quite secure in it. You don't know what's going to happen next. So in those moments, I feel like, you could become very jaded and pessimistic, and that can lead to certain things, or you can kind of lean into, well, what could go right, and what can I be grateful for in the moment? And it can be hard, and maybe you kind of oscillate between those moments. It's not a constant, but I think having the mindset of like, yeah, good things can happen for me and around me, it does take you to appreciate what you have and the opportunities you have, right?
Yeah, I think it just starts with being very real and realistic, like inside, your heart, your body. You're really the most important person to know intimately first before friendship, companionship, client. I mean, all of that stuff. So going through a situation like that, even if you're optimistic and say, I know it's going to be okay, but also having the right to say, this is a tough time right now. I'm not feeling great about it. Like my optimistic side is saying it's all going to be good in the end, but like, I'm not happy right now. And that's okay. I think being able to sit in that and observe it, enjoy this to me is like the journey of life, in essence.
Yes.
But, you know yourself better than anyone else. And if you don't, you kind of have to invest in yourself before, because we live in a time that everybody wants to have the answer and be able to tell everybody what that answer is. And the reality is, no matter how close you are to somebody, the only way to really know how they're doing at any moment of time, it could be in the morning versus the afternoon when you speak to them, is by asking them. Things can change in a day. So yeah.
In coaching clients, that's one of the things I think a lot of people struggle with, is being able to sit with things that don't feel good, because we just want to rush through the moment, right? It's like, okay, get me to the next part where I start to feel better. But all of these signals just become louder the more we avoid or kind of distract from them. So what has helped you to kind of cultivate some of those practices to be able to sit with something that doesn't feel good and, observe it, give it that space, process it for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say overall, I feel like I've had a good pulse on myself and how I think for a long time, ever since childhood. Obviously, you grow and what you think about in childhood is very different in adulthood. But, I think things that shape you early on in life, positive or negative, I grew up in a divorced family, and both my parents remarried. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of like untimely death in family through cancer and, other diseases. So it's not like things were perfect, but there's certain things that were always, consistent. I grew up in a very loving place. I mean, I was respected in my family and, with my peers and my friends. And of course, you're going to butt heads with people, but there was never any doubt in like the core big things. Like, am I safe? Of always. Yeah. Am I loved? Yes. If we have an argument, like it's okay in the grand scheme. So I go all the way back there because I think that's an important one, at least for me. It's probably something I just take for granted because that's what I knew. But I do feel like that probably has a piece in me of why I feel so comfortable with myself and I know myself, at least, early on in life. Then I would say, as life goes on, things happen, right? Positive and negative. And while I'd say by large, most of my life has been positive, the things that have been hard and some of the like the big rocks, the irony is, through those times, again, it's easy to look back, but like that is for me where so much of the growth happened, and where you really know what you're made of in yourself. And that's not to say we don't want most of our life to be good and happy, but it warrants understanding that when things don't go right, and especially when things go completely belly up, especially if it's around the things you care about, the big rocks in your life, when you can sit with it, really understand it, unpack it, the facts behind it, the emotions behind it, what's real, what isn't, what actually happened, what you were thinking happened, a million things. Again, it's coming back to what you know. And especially if it involves another person, we have this feeling usually of like, this person's doing this to me or vice versa. I don't want to say that's never the case, but I think it's far less of the time. Even when someone's mean to you, it could be a stranger. I always look at it as there's probably something going on with that person that it's like a projection, right? And you just happen to be the target that's right there at the time, but it's something within. So all that to say, like, I never took a course on this. I didn't read books on this or anything, but when something does happen that kind of hits you, across the face when you're least expecting it, you can kind of dig into it and figure out how to get out, or you can, I guess, put your hands up or something in between. And I remember in those situations coming out, feeling actually stronger in myself, feeling better about the trajectory forward, feeling that, maybe this wasn't right. By the way, some of these could be early promotions. It could be a multitude of things, but in the end, there hasn't been a time I've looked back that I've said, this didn't happen for all the right reasons. And I'm a firm believer in, you can call it whatever you want, the universe, your respective, faith, or, if you don't have a religion, obviously same, if you're an atheist, whatever, I guess part of your anchors are, I'll just call it the universe. Like, I don't think the universe hands anybody anything that they can't handle. And it sounds a little ridiculous because some go through very, very hard times, over and over and over again. But I guess I just think about the outcome of what those things are. And if the person gets back on their own 2 feet, they have the resilience in themselves, quite frankly, you're somewhat untouchable, because if you really believe in yourself and you can get through because of getting through other hard things, then at least for me, you start living a life of being a little more in the present, and just saying, let whatever wants to come to life come. Let me enjoy all of it. And if something hits the fan again, it's okay. It's not ideal, but I'm going to be fine. For me, at least, if I didn't believe that in myself, there was no amount of people around me that could tell me, you got this. It actually doesn't really matter. It might give you a little confidence, but I think spending more time in developing that muscle for each person within themselves is probably the key.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think one of the things that I notice is people who do have that, whether, they've developed it over time, or, they grew up in a certain way where they kind of just had that self-belief. I just see that they handle the situation so much better, whether it's at work or in life, right? Like, because they know, like, okay, I can figure it out, right? At the end of the day, that's a really powerful thing to believe and say to yourself, because nothing is ever 100% figured out, right? Like you're always going to run into things, and you have to kind of figure out, okay, well, I haven't run into this situation before, but I got to believe that I can navigate this, right?
Yeah.
And when I see clients or just people struggling to believe in themselves, to feel like I can do this, I see how much it holds them back from doing all the things that they want to do, and they know they're capable of at some point, right? Because they've done similar things, or they know they have the skills, but somehow they haven't really landed on but I can do this, right? I agree with you that it's definitely worth spending that time to build those skills. And so, sometimes, I've struggled with that, especially in consulting, where you just kind of get thrown into new things and you're just like, okay, I know I haven't talked about this area of this product before. And now I feel like I'm talking to people who have 20 years of experience, and I'm going to tell them what to do. And, in some sense, that sounds kind of crazy. But at the same time, they also don't have the knowledge on the software that I do, right? So it's like they're looking to me to provide that information. So you have to kind of reframe it to say, well, I'm going to learn from them, and they're also going to learn from me. And I have to allow that space to happen where maybe I don't get it right sometimes, and to recover from it, right? So I don't know, consulting really taught me that piece.
Well, just to pull on the string for a second, it's really interesting because if you think about it, just your example you use, I'm going to go meet with somebody that has 20 years more experience, right? Now that might just mean they're in a role for 20 more years. Even that statement alone, which is a totally normal thing to think, it's actually the thing to think. But if you really unpack it, it's like you're already setting up a false narrative, potentially. You're thinking about what someone else is thinking. Now, don't get me wrong. For me, been in this industry over 20 years, my expectation when I meet an analyst or a consultant, someone a year in, what am I going to learn from them? Yeah, I can educate them on career growth and how this is, but I know what I was doing at that time, and it was kind of pushing the envelope and cutting edge. So here, I'm just flipping the script. It's my expectation is that I'm the one that's going to be in the beginner mindset learning. So I think that's one other thing that's helped me. I tell my teams all the time, and maybe this is only me, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think it's good for everybody to have some sort of an anchor in a worst case scenario. What is the worst thing that can happen? And what is my anchor point of saying to myself, it's actually in the grand scheme of things, okay. Now for me, and I'm talking, you can use this for life, I guess, but I usually tell my team about this at work, but I guess it's applicable for both. In a job, when I ask my team, they're stressing out about something. I say, what's the absolute worst thing that can happen in a job? And nobody ever answers it the way I think they're going to answer it. It's something, but it's actually not that bad. I'm like, no, you get fired. That is the worst thing that can happen in your job. It's true. You get fired from a job, right? That being said, if that even happened, it's not going to happen. But even if that happened, if you zoom out on your entire life, what is the weight of that? I mean, it's going to hurt. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're happy about it. But generally for people, yes, that's not going to be a good thing. Are you going to find another job ever? Yeah, you're going to find another job. Are you going to land back on your feet? Yes. Still a bad thing. So it used to be if that's the absolute worst thing that can happen, then when you go into this meeting you're nervous about, just because you're not sure about, should we configure it this way or it's okay. It's, be authentic, be vulnerable. My thing personally, and obviously depending on roles you play in a career, you can have a good amount of pressure underneath you, making you make a call and you have a lot of people that are relying on that call to be right. However, my big thing, and I told you about some, my family and unfortunately some medical stuff in the past. Like, I wake up in the morning, that's my anchor. It sounds so easy and so obvious, but anytime I kind of feel like a little stress coming on, business decision, like, I'm alive. Nobody's going to remember this decision, even in like a week, probably, but call it a month tops. I'm not saying if you're waking up every day and it's a bad day for weeks and weeks, you can't keep saying, well, I'm alive. Like, something has to change.
Right.
But at least for me, that allows me in any situation to feel that stress, to just kind of close it off pretty quickly. Cause it's like, actually, this doesn't feel good in this situation, but it's going to be fine. It's not a problem. So I only bring that up because I think, again, that's something only the individual could answer and how they feel. But just having a worst case scenario, because most of the time, I think your worst case scenario is something, if you really thought about it, you would say it's actually not that bad in the grand scheme of things. But
no, I love that mindset, and also just kind of that moment of presence, right? To really acknowledge, like, hey, I'm alive, I exist, I'm in this moment. Because of course, there's so much going on. We don't always take the time to acknowledge that. And one of the things that did start to help me is realizing, like, okay, this career is important, or this job is important, and I want to do well, but I'm not making life or death decisions, right? Like, we can walk it back, or we can kind of pivot and figure out if something doesn't quite land. That, there's a path that we could take to correct it. And that really started to help me to be less stressed about some of these things, because I was like, if you're a doctor, or like you're making really critical like decisions for someone's health or something, I really can't imagine like what that feels like. But I was like, my job is not that. So I can at least, take a step back and look at the bigger picture and just say, hey, are we making a sound decision? Have we thought of different trade-offs and different things? But at the end of the day, it's going to be okay, and we can kind of figure out the next step. And I think it also helps you to take more risks and to try new things with that frame, because or else you're holding yourself back because you're paralyzed to move forward.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And I think, in taking more risks, a little bit of what you're describing now too is like, you have a bit of that vulnerability and, the explanation behind it to yourself, but also showing that authenticity to your team. And I'm not usually worried with getting the right answer every time. It's more about, have I thought about all the things behind the decision? And I don't know. I look at all different leaders that I followed in my life, and a big part of that, this is me personally, not everybody, but seeing someone that you believe in and they get it and you can follow with an equal like percentage of vulnerability. To me, that's everything. I think, not to pull it all the way back, but when we were going through COVID, early days, to me, to hear someone say, we got everything under control, we know exactly what we're going to do, we have, like, it doesn't feel right to me. Who would have everything under control 2 weeks into this, right? And this is me, but to have a leader that says, this is everything we've done, we have all of this aligned, but I got to be honest, we've never gone through this before. We're still I'm personally figuring it out, but we got you, and let's answer honest questions. Like, that's someone that's a human being, a real, like a person that's a leader that, don't get me wrong, like, I'm sure if you're marching into battle, you don't want someone like, I think this is going to go okay, but I don't know. That's how I tend to lead. Pretty much all the time now, because it has resonated for me. I'm curious. Same for you as well? Or
absolutely. And I see it like, I've seen leaders who've been more transparent of like, hey, this is what's going on. We're working through it. We're figuring it out. I have so much more respect for that than I think. I've also heard leaders that have kind of said, here's the state of the company. And it doesn't feel authentic or right because you're also in the company, right? Like, and you're part of the system. So like what's true and what's not. And when I think it's not as transparent, like people feel it, like they know it. So I have so much more respect for that. And also I can get behind a leader who's going to say like, hey, we're figuring it out. And, if you have input for this, right, like let us know like how that may impact our decisions, as opposed to like everything's great when it's really not. So I always think people can read that and feel that. So, and I know we've also worked together, and I also felt that genuine, I think, transparency from you in our projects, right? Because I mean, as much as we plan things, like it never goes according to plan. So you have to just accept that and just go, okay, well, where do we go from here? Or like, what's really going on? What's the sentiment from the client, right? And the more transparency you have in that, the better I think your team can also contribute to navigating it. Better when you're not there, right? Because they're kind of there every day. So yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, and I think understanding everybody's perspectives too, because you just think about this on a project, from our side of the house, it's how many people on that project is it their promotion year? How many people on that project are learning something for the first time? How many people are super mature and they're training a team? What's going on in their life? There are a million things, right? And unless you get into each person's head to say, this is how it's playing, and then you flip to the client and it's equal. Is my career on the line for this project? What if something goes wrong here? What are all the constraints? So I think everything people feel like internally, it's probably all around the same type of stuff.
Yeah.
And the more you have, I would say, just like an open relationship with your team and the client, there's nothing better to me. You're right. Things don't go according to plan ever. Now, how far they stray and the impact is very different, right? But when things don't go according to plan and it's someone's either fault or it's something that, to me, it's like when that stuff comes up, that's when you know your true strength with your team and your clients. That's when you buckle down. And some of my best clients, fortunately, most of them, it's like, all right, what are we going to do to solve this? There's no, it's on you. It doesn't even have to be discussed. It's more like, what's the path forward? And I think about that very similarly with friends, relationships, all of that. When times are good, I mean, in my opinion, yeah, like my best friends are people I want to be around, but you could kind of replace anybody with anybody when the times are good. It's like, oh, but when they're not, or it's a tough situation, who do you want around you? You want people that are dead honest with you, even if it might hurt your feelings. You want people that are willing to roll up their sleeves to get through it. And you want to be on the same page. If you have people around you that are running out the door the second times are tough, but they're right with you when everything's good, I'm not saying get them out of your life, but you need to understand, like, that is not somebody that's in the foxhole with you on a project that might be insanely difficult versus something that's a bit more straightforward. To me, it's most powerful, though, I think, with clients, because especially when you're at, leadership for a firm and a client, all of that type of feel and messaging can get pushed down as well. And everybody can feel it, or everybody can be isolated from it. But yeah, I tend to think about it in that manner quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And so I think to bring our conversation back to your career, being in consulting, very early on to midpoint to like senior leaderships, what have you learned at those different stages of this beautiful career that you have?
Well, thank you. I don't know if I've heard of it as a beautiful career before, but I should have a set of flowers behind me.
Yeah.
We have a nice plant up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's been growing.
Yeah. It almost, it looks so nice. It looks like a fake background. That's how nice your area is.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and this might be, I'm sure it is different for different firms, different career paths, etc.
Right.
I would say for me, though, part of the early stages of my career, kind of the analysts through senior consultant, I would call these like responsibility for an entire team. I may have been managing 2-3 people in some of those roles, but like before you're shifting to that management side, so much of how I was looked upon, evaluated, and kind of what I felt like my strongest value was to the business we operate is what am I bringing to the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
How am I taking things that have been done before and making them better? How am I, leading the charge with clients and making a big impact? But a lot of even year-end meetings were probably like me, up to that point. And that's how I was incentivized, to be honest. I would say from that like era into more managerial, becoming a manager, senior manager, different people have different opinions, but I think in most careers, that is probably the hardest step, because what ends up happening is you're given a body of work that you just could not get done by yourself if you wanted to, right? Even if you rolled up your sleeves. And if you're someone that's very prideful about the work they deliver and the quality of that work, and now you're handed 5 people underneath you to get all of that done, sometimes, a lot of the time, people have a tough time letting go.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, what if the quality, it's a lot of these what ifs where well, I could just work a late night. I could do this prior and get it done. And it's a really interesting time, because when you don't let go, or you're leaning in too hard, or you're taking all the ways you learned and trying to just push it on someone without educating them, this is all it's all bad for the system, right? The people that are in those other roles reporting to you don't feel like they have the autonomy to make decisions. You're stressing out because there are 5 different people doing hundreds of different things. You can't control all of it. And you're being looked upon as the person. So I think that's a tough change, but it's also, to me, it's like the most rewarding, because you can look at some staff that come into a role that don't have any experience in it prior, that leave that role, and they're the ones that are now training other people. And more important than that, they're just enabled in a new set of technology, functionality, business acumen, whatever it might be. And in a way, you can say, I kind of orchestrated that. That's what we should be doing. Everybody should be growing in their career. So you have that.
Yeah.
You also have the aspect, what I've always loved is what I did to get to this point was fine, but they just did it better, like much more efficiently. Even if the output wasn't different, they took a totally different angle at it. And you have to be open to that. You really have to have that type of personality to have that. But I say all of that to just say, after that first half of the career, like the next wave was very much around building, empowering, and leading insanely efficient and strong teams. And up until that point, I had a lot of amazing people underneath me, and I was nervous. Like, what happens when there's someone that you really just can't develop, and that happens. But it's all good. That's how life works. So I would just say that point of my career was much more around being able to let go, being able to trust, and getting back to my earlier point of like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, in that situation, the worst thing that can happen is someone misses a deadline and then time lines up. Someone has low quality on their deliverable. That all of these things are coachable. They're to me, they were never big enough for me to cloud my mind and my body with the what ifs across the board to like paralyze me. It was, all right, we'll see what happens. We'll deal with it. We've done the best we could in the setup. And I also gave out manageable chunks of work. I was never been a micromanager, but I'm not going to give someone a piece of work and say, let's see what it looks like in a month, right? I mean, you're checking in. So you're know how far you can go. But yeah, that was probably the second half. And then the third half, in becoming a partner at the firm is very much about everything I described previously, just at a much higher scale with a much higher impact to people. And so that's the type of thing where, you feel so lucky and privileged to be in a position where you can help, people across the board in a very significant way. But with that comes the ability you can mess things up in a pretty significant way as well. And I don't think it happens that often, especially if your heart, your mind, everything is in the right place. But that level of responsibility, quite frankly, it could be paralyzing for some, which is why, you have multiple different career paths. But those are probably the three big chunks over, I guess, 22 years to sum it up, different aspects of that.
Yeah. What I noticed the thread for it is that as you move up, you're letting go more and more, and you're focusing on building trust and capabilities in people to make it happen, right? And I think that part is really difficult. Like, one, delegating and knowing, like, okay, what decisions and things do I need to do, and what can I delegate to others? That's a huge kind of learning curve as you move into management kind of positions. And then, as you go up, it's like, okay, well, now I'm managing pretty much managers, right? So they are capable and doing things. How do I enable them to get to that even further levels that we need to, push them towards? So at each phase, like you have to kind of step back a little bit more and trust a little bit more, and hope that everybody's kind of doing their part in playing their roles.
Yeah. And getting back to this, being honest with yourself, not every role, even if you're capable of getting to that level by what a business sees, not every role is applicable to every person. Quite frankly, some people don't want to manage. They do not want to be in and that's fine. I think that's what plays into, as you're moving up or not, you have to understand why you want to or don't want to, right? Because there are definitely, you can get into very senior positions in business that don't have managerial responsibilities. But a lot of this plays a bit more into, what are you really good at? But most importantly, you're really good at it and it's a strength. It gives you a ton of energy. Where I think people get stuck sometimes is they're recognized for something they're really, really good at. And they are truly in like the output or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They can't stand doing it. And if you get in something like that and you're not clear with your intentions, people are going to constantly come to you for that and you're going to be miserable. So some of it, one thing I didn't say, just thinking about this now, that I would go back to early in my career, not that I'm not exploratory now, but early in my career, it was like, I really like working financial services, but I haven't spent time in other industries before I focus there. I should look at all these other industries. So I worked in all different industries. It's like, I really like this technology, but do I just like all technology? So I was exploring a ton. I was learning a lot. So I think that's another phase too, about you can always pivot, you can always change. But I only bring this up because you do not want to get pigeonholed into something that you really don't enjoy. You'll start resenting the projects, the work, the people, and it's all because of a small thing that's like, I could have just pivoted. I built myself up using that skill, but it's like, what I really want to do is this. You have to be vocal about those types of things. So,
yeah, I agree. And, it's sometimes hard to say like what you want, like having been in some of those positions where it's like a project is offered or something, and you really want to say yes because of the people offering it to you. Cause you're like, I love working with you. And of course, like I want to be part of this project, but it's not an industry or a space I see myself going into or am interested in learning more about. Right. So to be able to also kind of say that, I think at your maybe earlier stages in career is also very difficult. Cause you kind of want to be a player and just being like, yeah, of course, let me go learn this. Like, I don't mind, right? But like to your point, if you're really not interested in it, you have to be able to kind of say no. And then also to communicate like, hey, I am interested in learning X, Y, and Z. And then the opportunities can be opened up for you as well for that. But you have to communicate that first within yourself to kind of get clear what is that you're interested in. And then with like your managers and just people you talk to within your company, so that they know like, hey, when this comes up, we know this person's like really interested in this and they would be great fit for this, right? So
yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, everybody, and I don't work in a very hierarchical firm anyway, and different firms are different, right? But everybody, in my opinion, is a human being with an equal voice. I don't care what your role is at a company. You may have higher authority to make business decisions. That all makes sense. But in terms of expressing needs, wants, and everybody is equal. That being said, as I've done that in my career, and that started very early on, and I was really enjoying what I was doing anyway, but asking for new opportunities in a technology, but a different area of the business, that was always very welcome. But as I started thinking about working in new technologies, I think there's just a balancing act. I would voice that as a want, but I'd have, 5-6 months left on a project. And leadership at the time was like, listen, we'll totally make that happen. If you can see this through, and I wasn't planning to leave that project anyway, but if you look at these things as a two-way street, and it has to be a two-way street, right? If you're basically saying, yes, I'm going to finish something out or whatever that might be, give us another year, and that doesn't come to fruition, that's a different story. But you also can't expect to raise your hand, say something. Some businesses can't just flip on a dime and do that. But if you don't bring it up, to your point, Dar, most people can become resentful because they're not getting what they want. And if you were to ask all the leadership around them what they want, no one would even have an idea. So use your voice, just use it in a way that's not demanding, but putting your needs out there and then coming up with a joint plan to fulfill that opportunity together.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it is a two-way street. So you want to kind of see, okay, how can I be helpful in finishing up what I'm doing now? And how can I set myself up for the next thing that I want to do, right? Because that bridge sometimes has to exist, especially if you're going into a role that's maybe different or slightly different and requires different skills. You also want to set yourself up, right, to make that happen. So just taking guidance from those you're working with, and looking into mentorship and coaching and advising, right? Like to say, okay, how can I pivot into something like that, right? Because sometimes it's not always clear. So, and also asking people who are in the positions you want to be in to being like, hey, what kind of skills do I need to be here? What should I be working on now to like set myself up, right? Because none of it is like magic and happens overnight. So you kind of have to pave that path towards what you want. Yeah.
Yeah. And sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was just thinking about what you're saying. A few things. One, based on what we were talking about earlier, like being present in the role and not always thinking about the next thing, right? You should definitely have line of sight into long-term goals. I'm not saying don't do that, but when you get on a project or, depending on the business you're in, you're working in something and you're a month in and it's getting a little old because of whatever reasons, and you're already thinking of that, like, you're missing an opportunity unless it's truly just a misfit in the role to who you are, or there's just a misalignment there. Being in that for a bit of time, like I've always looked at my career in the long game, and even in promotions. I mean, I always personally wanted to stretch to become a partner at my firm, but whether that's what you want or there's something else out there, just know whenever I like looked at it and zoomed out, I declined an early promotion or I didn't get a promotion the year I thought I was going to get it. As tough as that was, and it's tough, I would always zoom out and say, well, in the end, it's really going to make a difference if it's an extra 2 years here or 3, like on a career.
Right.
For me personally, no, it's not. It never has. And it wasn't a race to the top because you're getting all these learnings as you go.
Right.
So that's one piece. The only other thing I would say, and I mentioned some of this earlier, sometimes, and it just so happened, like the hardest projects I was on were early in my career when I didn't know as much. Those, as painful as they are, those are the best opportunities to learn. As I was kind of saying earlier in life, like when things hit the fan, those are opportunities in yourself to like really learn and acknowledge what you're made of. It's the same thing. I mean, my first project ever in my career, everything was out of sorts. Leaders, every like functional area. And so I'm this like little analyst that's just going around. I learned like 7 modules. I basically learned probably 5 years worth of work on a 2-year project. And I was 21 at the time. Like if I'm at work and I'm not hanging out with my friend, like that's okay for me personally, that time of life. It's like, this is going to allow me to learn more and it's going to increase my trajectory. But I just say that because you shouldn't be on these terrible projects time after time. But if you get on something that you're like, this is broken everywhere, if you lean into that and you're part of the solution, you will learn more on what not to do in the future and what to do than you would on just a project that's operating, perfectly as it goes through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think every project has something to teach you, right? Because you're working with different people. It's so nuanced. Like you can always kind of step back and go, what am I taking away from this? Again, have the vision of like maybe what you want, but be kinder about like how fast you get there, right? And I think all of us have been in that situation where it's like, well, no, I want to get there faster. I mean, I felt that too at times, but looking back, it's like, you know what? It didn't really make a huge difference. It was fine. It felt frustrating at times, but I still learned a lot and I still grew within that time period. And in fact, I was maybe more confident going into the next promotion, right? Because it's like I had more time to really even start going more and more into that next role during that period, right? So yeah, I think we have that, especially now, even more so now, right? Like with kind of everything being on social media and you see like, oh, so got promoted faster or whatever, right? In your peers. And it's hard to kind of like not compare sometimes to being like, well, they started at the same time or whatever. And, I should also be doing this. But everyone has their path and, maybe they're enjoying what they're doing. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're miserable. Maybe, so you have no idea really what's going on. I was just reading this book. It's called Same as Ever. And one of the chapters is basically about this. It's like you have no idea what's going on in anyone's life, right? We have this very polished kind of view online now of all the successes, right? Like the highlight reels. And what people don't tell you, though, it's like all the stuff that is going on behind the scenes for them. And they could be completely happy. They could not. You have no real idea, right? It's all kind of this polished branding that's happening. So I try to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, it would be interesting if on these platforms there was a happiness meter next to everybody's avatar. My sister, I feel like my sister said it best, and I'm on LinkedIn. I kind of got off social media well over a decade ago, but nothing against it. It wasn't for me. But my sister would always say, growing up pre-internet, also. If your clothes were on the drying line outside and represented all your issues, you would look outside, you would look at your neighbors, and you would pull your clothes back in every single day of the week. So, and I don't think you should live your life saying someone else has it worse, so I should feel okay.
Yeah.
But of the psychological aspects of all of that is it's wild these days.
It is
very, very wild.
Yeah. And also it's like not just about like, are they happy or not, but it's like you don't know what they go through to be in that position, right? Like maybe you yourself might not enjoy it. Like you don't know, right? So I think it's easy to look from the outside to being like, oh, I want that. And then once you have it, you're like, actually, this isn't for me, right? So you don't know until you're there in a sense either.
Yeah, there's a gentleman I listen to all the time, Morgan Housel. He wrote a few books, Psychology of Money and a few others. But one of the things he harpers on all the time is, in terms of like keeping up with the Joneses, if you're driving that flashy car, and if someone happens to be looking at that car and you think for a second they're picturing them in your life, no one in the history of time has ever done that. They're picturing themselves in your car.
Right.
So yeah, no one's, especially with a career, they're picturing themselves with that role. And am I going slow if that person's going fast? But again, happiness isn't the only meter there for sure. Fulfillment, there's a lot to it, but I don't know. I feel like if you're leading a very fulfilled, enriching life with incredible people around you, I don't know if it gets better than that personally.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to touch on this, before we go into the wrap up. Right now, as we mentioned earlier with AI and everything, there's a kind of transition happening maybe with future work. And what is your advice for someone who may be like a new grad and is facing like a tough, labor market, similar to what you faced when you graduated, but also there's a lot of turnover, even if you land a role and position. I feel like you have so many great mindsets and perspectives. So I'm curious to hear what your advice would be for someone that may be in that position.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't know if my advice and mindsets are tested in AI world, but it'll show if they prove right. I think some of the things that were done early in the career may still relate. You asked the question, and I just put myself in that person's shoes to kind of think about the answer. There's certain things, certain truths that I don't think will ever change. And some of those things include, how you show up for other people. They include how you market yourself. They include how people feel around you. But a lot of it's human related. And so if you're in a position now, you're looking for, your first job, obviously outside of the normal, working through a career, drawing a blank, like a unit at university, your counselor. I would say, knowing somebody or having at least somewhat of a connection into, even if it's a third acquaintance at a company you're potentially looking at, and leveraging, platforms like LinkedIn to figure out who and how you're connected to someone to get to them, even just to share why you're interested, is a great way to do it, especially if you're looking at a specific company. Now, if you're looking at different roles, you can, take the same tact, but also, have a good pulse on what others are doing, especially if your friends have landed jobs, how they were able to do that. I think you have to be a bit more creative in the world today. There's so much that goes through algorithms. And if you think you're going to just get something by submitting your resume everywhere, I mean, the odds and the probability nowadays, I don't have any stats behind this, but I just talking to a lot of people that come in, very, very low. It just like cold submission of a resume and getting an answer. So I think the stronger you can network out, and don't do it alone. I mean, if you have family and friends and acquaintances that are somehow tied to someone, even a short message to someone, like I said, on LinkedIn from that person saying, listen, my nephew or my friend or whoever that might be, super interested in this. This is what they're all about. And just having a good, quick, concise way of explaining the value you could bring, but also being extremely authentic in yourself goes a really long way. I think some of the other avenues, what we're facing right now, we've never faced something like this before, where the pace and change of the technology, and especially the technology that we have our hands on, is evolving so insanely quickly that it is so far surpassed human knowledge and learning. So what that means is you're going to have to be insanely flexible, and you're going to have to start to find things that, no matter how insane this tech evolves, what are the things that have to be or have to exist in every business or the field you're looking at? And I would hone more into those skills versus, I know this latest model, obviously understanding prompt engineering, all those skills are insanely valuable.
Yeah.
But just, I would ensure you're not getting too pigeonholed into like the flavor of the day.
Right.
And then the last thing I would say is, I mean, I'm going to kind of speak against what I said earlier when I was young in my career about like getting nervous about taking a job that might pigeonhole me into something that I didn't want to do. We're not operating in that world anymore. And what I mean by that is, if you start a job doing X, to pivot and do something completely different, I think a year from now, is totally in the realm of possibility. So I say all that because if you do have opportunities, and maybe it doesn't check every single box on your list, but it checks enough, and by going into this job, you can add value, you can meet new people, you can expand your network, you can learn, and you can take more of those skills out. That's probably a lot more powerful than sitting on the sidelines for another couple of months, looking to land the best perfect job you can find. You might also surprise yourself in doing something you had no idea you would enjoy that you love. Just those are just some thoughts off the top of my head.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that perspective. Because I mean, your firm is hiring, of course, all the time. So you kind of see the challenges also on your end, right? To receive so many resumes and how difficult it is to like just sort through that level of volume. And I think now people are kind of leaning more into relationships, right? That is becoming much more valuable and important than just applying, right? So you can apply, but I think the relationships that you build can also convert into opportunities that may not have existed otherwise, right? So I think you can do both at the same time, of course. And the other point where you mentioned, like, yeah, it's, I think we're all going to be pivoting into so many different roles and careers going forward. There's not this like, long careers. I think that we've seen in previous kind of generations. So I think actually getting comfortable exploring like many different paths and going, okay, I've tried that. I can go try this now, and so I think the thing I'm getting is like continuous learning and being curious and just being open to seeing, okay, this is how things are evolving. Let me go learn and see what this is about at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. I mean,
being flexible.
No, you're absolutely right. And more so even, the amount of new jobs that are going to get created out of this next wave of our life. When I say new jobs, I'm not talking about new quantity of existing roles. Net new, this is actually a job in an industry that's never existed before that exists now. So yeah, being able to be flexible around that. And then to your earlier point, Dar, I mean, there are times people reach out to me on LinkedIn directly and they'll have background on me, on the company, on certain roles. And they're not writing me an essay, but there's enough there where it's obvious they took the time to actually do research. And every single one of them I put in front of a recruiter. Now, I'm not saying every person you get to is going to do that. But to your point around relationships, I mean, the way I always look at it is this person spent time doing this. It's not like a cold email. And if this is that quote unquote lucky thing that there's an opportunity, like the effort for me is so small to get their resume into a firm, but just to say, this is what I heard about this person and what they're thinking. Can we just get a quick phone screen? Like that little thing could be the opening to a whole career for someone, even if they only stay in that role for a year or 2 years. It's like the first. So don't doubt yourself in reaching out. But at the same time, I wouldn't send out 50,000 notes that are just a bog standard, whatever,
Right.
because if I see that, it basically shows me there's no effort. There's no effort behind it. So I would also keep that in mind. I mean, like shoot for the stars, just have a lot of different options and avenues.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of empathy for people who are going through this process right now because it is just tough. And nobody really knows how it's going to evolve. One interesting thing I did see today is Google DeepMind hired a philosopher. Like literally the role is philosopher. So, to your point, like we're going to have new positions that don't exist right now, new roles, new skills. And, this used to be kind of the joke, right? It's like if you study philosophy or like the liberal arts, like what are you going to do with your career? And now we're seeing
we're at it.
it's their moment to shine. So, so I think just genuinely being interested in what you're doing and seeing what the opportunities are, and reaching out to people, have a conversation if you can, and build those connections.
Yeah. I am firmly convinced no matter what happens with the evolution of tech and in society and jobs and roles, nothing will ever replace human to human relationships. And you know how you feel when you get a good hug from someone you really respect?
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that can meet that in terms of tech personally. So I only say that because that human connection is probably what's going to get you the job and the offer and all of that. So use those skills. And if you don't have those types of skills to be able to speak confidently, interact with people off of email or chat, like, video, or in person, that is the first course I would be focusing on right now, because I think that's going to separate a lot of the people that are in the recruiting pool going forward.
Yeah, for sure. So just really quickly, before we wrap up, wanted to ask, are there any resources or tools that stay with you, such as books or podcasts? I know you read a lot, so anything that you're like, everyone should maybe read this book or listen to this podcast.
I mean, mine are so all over the place. One of I love finance. I always have. I love numbers. So,
Yeah.
but none of that's going to be like career focused. A lot of stuff. I mean, I'm listening to new ones all the time. I just started listening. Simon Sinek has a new one on, I don't even remember the name, but it's like on positivity and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to take this one at a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for books, podcast, I would lean into the things you really enjoy, and you have, potential for exponential growth if you're really getting good perspectives on that. And I'm sure most people are listening to that. What I would encourage more than anything, and I've used in my whole career, and it might be heavily because of the way I grew up, kind of being the youngest and having older people around me in jobs and family and friends, I would make sure that you're at least, talking to people who, if it's the first job you're looking for, are in that job. If it's a career that you're looking for, there are different stages of that career, all different types of people that they don't necessarily have to be just older than you, but just more experience. And it's not to listen to these people to say, let me follow their path, because no one has the same path, not even close, actually.
Yeah.
But it is something, and I've done this my whole life, where I think I know what I want to do next. But before I ever make a decision, I do a ton of like data collection, and I'll just listen to people. And what are they going to say? Some people will say, well, knowing what I know now, when I did this, I would have done this differently. Some other people will say this was great. That could be the same career, but going into anything in isolation, like you're the first, I would not recommend that. And whether your decision is exactly the same after talking to people or not is completely fine, but you may as well use resources like that. So I say that all to, instead of just pulling up a book or a podcast, maybe you start to seek out 3-4 new people to build in your network that have at least, a couple years or role experience above you in an area that you're interested in, to bend their ear. Because the reality is most people like talking about themselves, and they like telling you and sharing, especially people that can give back. So most people, will find the time, they'll welcome those conversations and just do a lot of listening and ask a lot of questions, because it might frame up what you think is your ideal path forward. So that's how I would answer that one.
Yeah. No, I think that's really great advice. And people listening to this podcast, right? They can kind of take that to the next stage. Because you're absolutely right. Like, there is a lot out there, and I think sometimes it's about self-exploration. That's why like books and podcasts and all these things can help you. And sometimes it's exploring with other people and their experience in kind of like a mentorship kind of role, right? And just saying, hey, what did you learn from this? And like you said, asking questions. So I think it's wonderful advice. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for your time and for sharing your journey and your experience. I feel like I learned a lot just through talking to you about all this.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for having me. I can't believe that we zipped right through it. I feel like we just had a good, fun, open conversation. I don't want to go back to work now. Wrap it up.
I
But no,
know.
thank
I
you. I
know.
really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on the Little Pursuits podcast. Please follow, subscribe, and share this with one builder who needs it. Check out the show notes for links to connect with us and our guests.